What happens when talent no longer means tenure? When growth is no longer a given, but something to be questioned? When culture has to stretch beyond full-time employees to include gig workers, algorithms, and systems that don't think or feel the way humans do? In this episode of The People Blueprint, we are joined by Sambhav Rakyan, a global voice in rewards, compensation, and people strategy, who helps us look beneath the surface of how organizations value people, from redefining talent in a skills-first world, to questioning whether pay still reflects contribution, to questioning whether growth itself needs a reset. Sambhav brings a sharply rational lens to some deeply human questions. This isn't a conversation about compensation. It's a conversation about power, fairness, disruption, and the choices leaders make when efficiency collides with empathy. This is the People Blueprint. Welcome to the People Blueprint. I'm your host, Sheila Vasan Singla. My guest today is someone who sits at the intersection of numbers and nuance. Sambhav Rakyan has spent over 2 decades working in the world of rewards, compensation, and people strategy. But what makes his perspective distinctive is that he does not treat compensation as a spreadsheet problem. He treats it as a reflection of how organizations think about value, contribution, and fairness. What struck me in our earlier conversations was how differently Sambhav and I look at the world. He comes from a deeply rational, data-driven place. I tend to approach these questions from emotion and experience from a different generation. But somewhere between those two lenses sits a very powerful conversation about the future of work. Welcome to the People Blueprint, Sambhav. It is such a pleasure to have you today with us.
Thank you, Sheila.
You know, Sambhav, one of the first questions I want to ask you is about the changing definition of talent. In today's world, you find that full-time employees are getting outstripped by gig workers, contractual workers. The skills that really were held in good stead, or the expertise that was held in good stead in the erstwhile definition of talent, is now getting blown out of the water because skills hardly last more than 12 months. In this kind of world, what is the new definition of talent? And should we be holding on to the old definitions of talent at all?
So it's a great question. I think talent, like everything, continues to change, right? And it continues to evolve. So I think you need to continue to augment the definition of talent, right? And I think as we see, you will always have people who have been in the organization for long enough, and then you will also have people who are just joining in new to be able to get to a certain growth project or certain skill sets that you don't have in the organization today. And these people might come in and may leave also soon enough because there are, the skill set of these people are quite a high in demand. So they are not as loyal to you. They are coming in for an assignment that can get done, and then they move on to another one. Unless and until you can continuously give them more and more learning opportunities. And then they are the ones who you invest a lot more time in. It's about, from a go-getter perspective, if they are coming in, getting you the best results in a very short span of time, you start investing in them today.
And if those skills are critical to your strategic outcomes?
Either through your strategical outcomes or a gap that you've been filling because you don't have those skill sets. Like, many organizations might not have today.
And it's very interesting, and I will tell you why in a little while. You see, today a lot of technical skills can be augmented with AI. So how do you then differentiate high quality talent from average quality talent from low quality talent?
I think what's challenging more and more is one is psychometric tests, right? Which can judge how the person is going to be and how you can look at that profile and match it to what is a success profile in your organization. So I really feel that the soft skills, the skills to be able to strategize, the skills to be able to disrupt, the skills to be able to network,
Innovate.
convince, innovate,
sense make,
and basically be entrepreneur. Don't think of a job as a job that I'm doing. If you're not going to enjoy this for the remainder of your life, then don't get in it. And people are very happy nowadays not to do a job just to make a living. They want to do a job to make an impact. So it's hard. It's hard work to get good people in the door. But I think it's even hard work to keep them in the
I
organization.
agree. But the way I see it is that there is no concept of perfect talent. Everybody is trying to find this perfect person to fit the role. And what I've always believed all through, not just now, that if the value set is right, then every other skill can be learned.
And I think it's more true today than any point in time, because if you look at it earlier, the industry knowledge importance was very important. Now today, I think firstly with education, secondly with AI, people are much more adaptive and can learn much faster and can learn the pace you want to.
Yes.
But today, if I just have 5 minutes, I can learn something fast, retain it, come back to it, don't come back to it. It's all great.
So here's where I'm going to do a little pushback. And I didn't expect to start doing a pushback in the very first question. But you see, I have always believed that there are certain things that you can learn fast, but capability takes time. So you can read 100 books on leadership. You can watch 25 reels on leadership. But for you to become a good leader, you need to steep in the role. So you're right to a large extent that, people are getting smarter, quicker, they're getting faster in what they do. But I just want to leave this thought that some things take time. And in this fast world, maybe we need to be cognizant.
But I think the way we need to look at leadership today is a bit different. I think earlier, leaders had to have gray hair. Leaders had to be a certain demographic, a certain age, a certain amount of time need to be spent in the organization. I think today that definition is changing far more because of the fact that it's not just about the learning, but it's about adapting faster. I think the feedback mechanism is faster. If I am in my 30s or 35 and being given a leadership responsibility, I am very cautious myself. So I'm always nurturing that feedback. What could I have done better? So I think that philosophy of leadership is evolving. And that was not earlier.
There's been such a lot of hype about performance. Do you think the way we are looking at performance will continue to be valid in this world where there are augmented people working, where you have people who come with AI, augmented worlds around us? Then what will define performance?
So I think performance will move from affordability to impact. Okay. So earlier performance, when we describe a bell curve and we would say, okay, you can have only X percentage of people who are your high raters and Y percentage of the population need to fall in that bigger bucket, which is pretty much how people would see it and do this as a year-end exercise. People now will want to think about, okay, what is the impact he or she is making to the organization? And that impact could be in 6 months, that impact could be in 6 years. So the person who will make an impact will stand out, and you would know it. Even when you run your organization, you know exactly the junior person who's made the impact and one who's just been in the run of the mill.
Yeah.
That philosophy will change for performance.
Now let's take a look at, something that has always stayed with me. I was about 23 when I read a book called The Popcorn Report by a lady called Faith Popcorn. She was a futurist. She predicted the rise of security as a huge business. So I have been tracking a few things that she writes, and I visit her website often. She talked about gig working, and she said there will be a time when people will vie for gig workers because of the skills they bring. Now, in that scenario, Is potential even worth looking at in an organization? Or should we be looking at only performance and saying, okay, here and now, can you create that impact?
So I think the gig economy is here to stay. I genuinely believe, and I think it's always been there. It's just now being more structured. And if that can be applied in that situation, and you can do a great job and you're just there for 6 to 12 months, again depending on the impact that organizations are making, if you're in a transformative journey, that you will, even a gig worker has to stay with you till that transformation journey is complete, right? So it's not going to be defined by the gig, is not going to be defined by the tenure. It's going to be defined by the skill that you can bring, which is very hard for me to either find internally, or to find externally, or to have that role for a very long time as well in the organization.
Fair enough. But would you take a look at a gig worker and say, would you evaluate potential of that gig worker, or would you evaluate performance?
I would still evaluate impact.
Okay, which is performance.
Which might be performance at the end of the day. What is the return I'm getting, right? At the end of the day, why did I get the person in, and is he or she being able to give me that value? Now, keep in mind, gig workers, again, depending on the role set that they are asked to do, is also not fair on how and when they can do the performance. Because if you're coming into a big organization as a gig worker, and let's say you are doing a transformative role, the 6 to 8 months is just to understand people.
Yes.
Just to understand the dynamics before you give your opinion. So people who think that they can, come in and change fast and move out, that is not gig to me, will not last long unless and until you just come in and do a digital marketing, right? You come in and run a campaign for me.
So I think one very important thing I'm taking out of this is that most people think gig is a freelancer who comes in, does something and goes out. You're saying a gig worker may be there for maybe a year, maybe 2 years.
And maybe they become full-time after a while, right? Because they adapt so well. Or they quit the organization because they are not able to make the impact.
While we're talking about the gig workers, and let's take the broader, definition that you had, where you say that even a gig worker will be held responsible for impact. So we know that culture is critical. Now, explain to me how you see the role of culture when so many of your people may not even be a part of your organization. Then how does culture start becoming important in this world of gig workers that you're talking about?
Culture is nothing that you can touch, feel. Culture is when you're talking to a group of individuals in the same organization, what is the belief, value that they hold true, which is what, and the impact that they want to make for their clients or for their employees or for the larger stakeholders, right? When your definition of employee segments move from just full-time to gig, part-time, to freelancers, that whole impact and that whole journey in terms of culture even becomes bigger. Because now you need to make sure that those people who are coming are not toxic to your organization chases, right? They can be disruptive, but they don't need to be toxic. They can bring a skill set, but they don't need to have an attitude, right? So I think it's very important that when you are bringing those people in, that you are still keeping the whole culture of the organization as the genesis together. But even gig workers, from their perspective, have to be very cautious. They bring the skill, but you always work with the people. So they bring a skill, but you work with the people. And if you can't work with the people, whatever they hold true for, it's always going to be a challenge.
I understand. And you're absolutely right, because skill without the right kind of environment, you won't even be able to apply that skill. And the environment gets built if you're able to align to the culture, the people, the values of the organization.
Exactly. But it's very important for them also to understand the organization first before making that impact. Every organization that we work with, you work with, is different. And we have to, I think people who understand change, who understand empathy, who understand how to go with the flow and work with various kind of people are going to be great. at
I
this
agree.
gig.
Because I think what people miss out on is to be a great gig worker or to be a great consultant or to be a great freelancer. You need to give the confidence to the organization that you're working with that, you know what, I'm going to represent you as well as, if not better.
So I'll give you another perspective on this. A lot of times, gig workers come into an organization thinking the organization needs me. They don't have the skill set and they don't know anything. So I can do what I want to. If you are going to be of that arrogant mindset that you know it all,
It's
and
not
you
going to
might
work.
have, and you might know it all also, don't get me wrong, but you are working for another organization. So culture, just to wrap all this up, culture is going to be so important for any gig worker to first understand. Take the first 5, 10, 15, 30, 90 days, whatever you want to, just know the whole organization and the play that you're at, and then you can make the impact.
I understand. So, in this world that is so technologically driven, we are saying the differentiating factor is the humaneness to really align to different cultures, to different environments, which maybe technology won't help you do.
100%.
Yeah.
And that is the skill set that is going to be the differentiator, right? I mean, we always talk about human in the loop in AI, right? Human needs to verify. But human AI cannot deliver a message, cannot deliver a tough message, cannot deliver a big message, cannot deliver a message of change, cannot execute strategies, cannot make can give you brainstorming on strategies, cannot make strategies. So I think this whole strategic thinking, being adaptable to change, I think that's so easily said. You need to be adaptable to change. Most organizations struggle with is change. Change is very tough. And people who are always open and adapting to change because change is good is going to be okay. So I just think it's about that adaptability, which is going to be so important as we go forward.
In this completely distributed world where you have transient workforces that come in and go out, what do you think leaders need to do to create belonging? And I'm going back to Faith Popcorn. What she has predicted is that with the rise of the gig worker and rise of skills that will become so unique, you will be fighting with each other to get the best talent into your organization. Now, one of the elements is, like you said yourself, getting talent is easy. Keeping them in is difficult. So what do you think leaders will need to do to really manage this transient workforce along with their full-time workforce and create a sense of belonging?
Yeah. I think firstly, leaders need to listen more. I genuinely feel listening is underrated. But if you're able to listen to all your stakeholders, I feel gig or full-time employees or your shareholders or your customers are all your stakeholders. Leaders need to listen more. Leaders need to be able to adapt more. So how do you adapt and how do you make that change happen is going to be very important. It's also the human empathy that leaders need to have a lot more way to. With I think we talk a lot about gig, but also there is now, people working full time in the offices. So rather than putting this code that this is a non-performer and this is a performer, understanding how to change the non-performers into the performers. I believe there is everyone has something which they can bring to the organization. We have not given enough chance because you spend a lot of time bringing someone in and you haven't spent the time to keep them in because you've not understood the ambition of the person, the skill sets of the person, what they want to bring to the market, because I inherently believe everyone wants to do their best.
While I'm listening to you, I'm also realizing that we've complicated leadership and leadership ethos to such an extent. What you're saying is simple. Be there for your people to help them do better. But while we're all talking about skills, assessment of those skills is becoming difficult. You did mention that technical skills are easier. But what happens when it comes to the power skills? What happens when it comes to I have the skill, but am I applying it at the workplace? How are some of those assessments taking place?
I think a lot has to do with still the interview process and the person. I just think that is where very hard to capture some of the soft and the behavioral skills on a piece of paper. It has to be through a conversation.
But we are depending more and more on technology to sort out resumes. How do you make sure that this kind of hiring process is fair and it's real?
So I think if you are talking about, yes, I want to hire 2,000 people, I can't be meeting 2,000 people, right? And then I do these video interviews. And then I also record someone who was like a great person I had hired. And I have their interview, okay? And I see how they speak. I see how their posture is. I see what the words they are using. And then I can similarly, create a profile, a good profile of what it takes to be successful in my organization. So I think all these things need to keep in mind. I'm not saying that we will disrupt all this hiring process in one day, but over the period where the future is going to look at is that AI is going to help create these avatars of every profile of person who has been successful in the organization, and I will be evaluating the people through those avatars.
And here is another place where I'd want to do a pushback. You cannot use the past to predict the future in all situations. I believe in history repeating itself, and I look at a lot of history to understand the future. But the people who've been successful so far in your organization or mine, there is no guarantee the same skill set, the same attitude, the same mindset will make them successful in the future.
So I think this is definitely true. But I think it's if you go back to the full culture, what makes the culture of an organization is people. And there are certain inherent skills in the people that makes them successful, that makes them adapt to the changing situation. When you build Chrysalis, you would have looked at certain people in the organization and said, these are the people, even if I am not there, the culture is this. And they might not be the most, sometimes might not be the most successful. They might, but they are the ones who keep that culture alive of whatever your client centricity or of whatever the organization stands for. Can we, through AI, be able to assess in our future candidates that can we see these people in our organizations to be able to continue with the culture ethos or be able to be adapt with what the company stands for. So I just think that is where AI might help us augment that. But I agree that it's not past precedence is not about the future, but culture is not past precedence. Culture is the rock solid middle of any organization.
So you look for cultural anchors.
Cultural fit, cultural anchors, value anchors, what the organization really stands for, what is the impact they want to do in the world, what is the purpose.
It's very interesting because we've talked about the definition of talent, we've talked about gig workers. There's been such a hype in India especially about education. But with learning becoming so easy to get, is there going to be a value placed on educational qualifications at all? And to what extent will it be placed?
So, I mean, that's a great question, something I've been passionate about for many, many, many years, because I go and look at these tier 1 has a separate pay range, and tier 2 has a separate pay range, and tier 3, and all these three are tiers and have done the same qualification of an MBA. And the way I always justify to myself to that is that, it's the hard work and the grit that someone who took in getting into a tier 1 versus a tier 2 versus a tier 3. And if you're looking for that hard work and grit, I don't always qualify for intelligence, but that hard work and grit
as a premium.
Then you get paid. But is that true? I don't think so. that should happen in the future. So I mean, the pay equality has to come in at some level where if you're doing the similar kind of a job, doesn't should not matter what your precursor qualification was. So it has to adapt into that. I also think future generations, you know, I don't think will do as much of postgraduate training as the current generation has done or the previous generations have done, and that is to do with a lot of practical learning and a lot of awareness, and also I think the organizations will continue to realize that people will come in, and if they are a good fit, they are a good fit, and they will continue to grow.
I tend to agree with you. I feel that this where I have studied from will not be as important as what are the skills I have learned and what are the skills I can apply. And therefore, I think assessment will become a large part of even finer and deeper assessment will become a large part of recruitment, and also pay scales maybe.
Yeah.
And together with impact.
Yes, I would take impact first,
But
because
you know,
it's
when
very
you're hiring somebody, you don't know impact.
Exactly, and that is where it's very hard. It's very hard to currently judge, you know, if this person is going to be a star in your organization or not. And you will not be able to do that till the time you can bring them in and give them a chance. Today's generation is not the same as the grunt work that was supposed to be done before. They are not shy to come up to you and say, you know what, I think you're doing everything wrong. And I think that is so powerful. That is the power that we need to utilize in the organizations.
And I tend to agree that it'll become skills that are more important than which college you studied from. This crazy obsession with grades and colleges and all are taking a backseat, because we are in a world where skills are being given a lot of importance.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. But at the same time, it's very hard to measure skills. See, I think where we have come from, we need to also realize, you know, our whole job architecture systems are today designed as functions, job functions, and how people are fitted into that function and which industry you belong to. You know, I always give this example of an executive secretary. An executive secretary today, what are the skill sets they need? An executive secretary today in financial services versus in pharma versus in a chemical industry are paid differently. The skill sets are not agnostic.
So I'm seeing a new definition of talent coming in without us actually defining it. And that is, it's not just skills that are enough. It is the ability to contextualize those skills in the environment that you're working in that defines talent.
Exactly. And that defines basically the job function that you've been hired for.
I think you're very right. Though the entire world is talking about skills-based organizations and all, it's taking time to get there.
Yes.
Because you may have the skill, but what if you don't have the right attitude? Then what do you do?
Exactly.
So there are all those issues. You know, I want to come to an area which is your area of expertise, which is show me the money. All right. So you have written and spoken extensively about compensation trends, about what's happening in the world. And one of the things that you say is that it's not important to ask today what is the market paying, but more important to ask what is the value that is being created. Do you see a stabilization of salaries, compensation in India today, globally?
So I think, I mean, comp is a very fascinating world to me, and I've been always doing comp for over 20 years now. And you know, we always say, is it a science, is it an art? So I mean, designing a pay philosophy, there is a formulaic way in every organization where a company says, okay, firstly, who are we losing talent to and who are we going to gain talent from? And that is very different in every organization, right? So there is a philosophy. You choose the peer group. Every year, big organizations then review their peer group and see for each of their jobs, where are they placed in the market. And what we define as the market is also a mathematical exercise. Where are you Are you paid at the P50th of the market? Are you paid at the higher quartile of the market? Are you paid at the lower quartile? And this exercise is done on an individual basis. And when organizations at the year end are defining their, okay, how did we do? Did we hit our numbers? Did we not hit our numbers? Or what is the plan for next year? They take compensation seriously and they say, okay, you know what? We have these many employees. We need to keep them engaged. We need to pay them. An employee doesn't realize that the companies work on a also on a P&L, right? There is revenue, there is cost, and then there is, between that gap, I can only pay you so much. So I can only afford that much. Companies are saying we don't have infinite resources. If you're just doing your job, which is great enough, we have been paying you enough. And you know what? We need to bring these new skill sets. We need to bring these people that are different in the organizations, and we need money for that. And, so the affordability and an impact to the organization is how the comp world gets determined. And it's not about one individual or two individuals. It's a whole exercise that's done with managers, with HR, with comp teams, with CEO, with CFO. All sorts of leadership teams gets involved. And everyone, believe me, I feel everyone wants to pay more. I'm sure you want to pay your employees more. But the question comes is, if you start doing that, then
Is your business sustainable? But do you see a change in the rules of compensation emerging? For example, are you seeing people moving away from performance-linked payments to outcome-linked payments?
So I think, so there are very different things that, we are talking about. I just feel the performance is based on, it's an insurance policy for the company. Okay. If the company does well, they will be able to distribute the bonuses well to all employees. If the company is not able to do well, their fixed cost is already given because that's the salary, right? Performance is linked to actual performance. In bigger organizations, it's linked to how they perform on the street. In smaller organizations, it's linked to, impact to the customers. And, again, how much is your cash flow? What is your run rate like? So every organization has a very different way in how they actually structure it. But it is basically performance linked is because it's based on your performance. Now, a lot of times and different roles, if there is a role in the organization where the impact is only going to be felt 2 years later, you have to keep that in mind. So you cannot have a one size fits all for every situation. You need to adjust. So every organization will have to have the adjustment, but big organizations is very hard to do everything that fits every employee's bill. And hence,
so you're saying that the logic of compensation will also become personalized.
I've been talking about personalized comp for a while, and it's not happened. But I do believe it will happen. Like, what is my life situation today? If I have a family and I have, I need to take insurance,
home loan.
I need to take home loan. I have a car loan, whatever. How can I structure my salary to the best versus someone who doesn't have kids, right? And would want to explore the world. And I don't mean personalized salary will mean different rates. I don't mean that. But how you choose the components of total rewards, I think a lot of people in India, especially, I feel, look at comp as just salary. But salary is just one part of your compensation. How much organization spends on benefits, your life insurances. You have, most organizations in India have health insurance plans, health insurance, not just to cover yourself, but your dependents, sometimes even your parents. You try getting insurance for your parents separately. You'll know how much that costs. You have benefits like accidental. And I feel like when something happens to you, like COVID was a great example, where a lot of employees realize the value of benefits.
Yeah.
You never take, like, you never see, you always say, oh, I'm getting a 30% jump. But you never see that, oh, you know what, that organization is actually not going to give me this health benefit, or it does not have in their health benefit coverage. Do they cover dental? Do they cover X? They don't review that, because that's a given that everyone will do the same thing. But these are the things that make a difference. They don't see if they have an LTI program or an ESOP program, or can I have an ESPP, which is employee shares can have a purchase that you can discount it. These are things that become larger, valuable, and can be have a compounding effect as well. So when I mean personalized, it's personalized to me, to say based on my life needs how I will structure the comp, how much in base, how much in bonus, how much in healthcare benefits, how much in something else. And that hopefully will happen, but that requires a lot of technology intervention of a total reward statement that is customized to yourself.
But do you see, with the gig economy becoming so much stronger and skills that they will bring to the table becoming more and more unique and more wanted, do you see the entire compensation structure changing for gig workers as well?
I think it's my value proposition as an organization, right? If I want to attract the best people, and I stand for being the total well-being, I care about the total well-being of my employee. And I don't differentiate between a gig or any employee. And I say, if you are going to work for me on my organizations, I am going to give you X, Y, Z. Versus if you are going to work for ABC organization, they don't give you, as a gig employee, they don't give you in healthcare or any of those. Then it's my value proposition. Today also, companies differentiate based on their value propositions, right? What do I bring to the table? What is my comp plan versus what is yours? So I just think that is what going to be is how I will be a differentiator.
I have a question that I've always wanted, or I've always thought about. With the work of the future changing and the future of work changing, both are changing. So what we'll be doing in the future is not going to be what we term as work. And the way work will be done will also be different. Do you see the possibility of a universal basic income coming into play? And when do you think it'll come into play? And then will it be even worth our while to talk about skills and differences, and what do you see in that?
So I think universal pay is definitely a far-fetched concept, right? Which means that everyone should get some level of basic needs met by the government, right? What I feel was going to be more nearer is, and we are already seeing is this in Europe, with the EU pay directive, which is going to come in, apply in June of 2026, where companies will have to report a lot more around their pay equity norms, around their pay transparency norms, around, are they actually differentiating between male versus females doing the same job? Are they differentiating? You cannot you cannot ask anyone how much were they paid in the last job. Today, how do we make the offers is, how much were you paid in the last job? Okay, I'll give you 30% more, come here. You cannot ask that anymore. And it's going to be based on what the job that I'm hiring you for.
And how much I am willing to pay for that.
I am willing to pay, or what is my market range. So I just think this whole pay transparency and pay equity is going to happen more. And people will, organizations would want to do a more just job on being more fair in the organizations. Now, do they have a lot of money to do that? I don't think so. So it will come to the same affordability bracket of the salary budget. And you would see that, some people are getting increases which are much more greater, and some are not getting increases. And that's part of making sure that they are taking care of the pay equity, pay transparency. So I think we all need to understand and get used to the fact that increases are not a given. You have to earn them, and it is based on the impact that you're going to make, not just because you are in the organization and it's the company's job to actually give you increase every year.
That's absolutely true. But tell me another thing. Do you see jobs across industries coming into the same bracket. You were speaking about an EA, or let's say a manager accounts. Do you at any point of time see an alignment of salaries coming in?
I don't see that happening, but it happens. Like, let me explain that. When we do compensation surveys, right, we actually collect data of all organizations in I mean, we have data of about 50 million employees, whereby we will collect all their jobs and what they are currently doing. When you as an organization are looking and benchmarking,
So
you
you know
are taking the industry
I
or
understand.
your peer group lens. So it inevitably happens that you are benchmarking for the
Already,
people who you
already.
want to leave
Yeah.
who are leaving your organization, or who are you attracting to your organization. So those pay markers kind of sticks.
Anyway, come
Anyway,
into
come
play.
into play.
Got it. Got it. That's really interesting. You know, I often talk about a concept called punk rock leadership. And that is leadership where you question established rules, you push boundaries, you roll up your sleeves, you're fighting for a larger cause. It's not just about you. And I feel that in the last 30 years, the templates that have existed on leadership need to be broken. And I'm seeing a new order of leadership that is required. So, from where you're sitting, I want to ask you a few questions about it. Do you believe that leadership needs to be disruptive, or do you think they need to stabilize today?
I think you need both. You need stability, but you also need disruptive thinking. And I think that is what, like, if I reflect on my journey, I've always been the one who's always been in that disruptive mindset, like question the obvious. Why are we continue to do that? Why can't we think about it in a different way? And over the years, like earlier, I would get very frustrated about it. Like, why can't they do it? It's just common sense. Over the years, I've realized the complications of the organization and how to navigate them to disrupt or be disruptive than just question why are the leaders not doing it. So I think sometimes we don't give due credit to leaders a lot of times, that they are going through a lot, and they try their best to be able to disrupt, but they have to maintain the current business. They have to have a lot of pressure on the numbers that they have to, plus they need to disrupt on the side as well. So it's a balance.
So, what I'm hearing you saying is that irrespective of what order of leadership comes in, it'll always be about balancing. See, the world is changing so fast, and you are a global leader as well. What do you think leaders should do, and what is it that HR can do to support leaders, or people practices? Why just HR? Any people professional, what can we do to support leaders in this crazy, dizzying pace of change that they're trying to grapple with?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to be a leader. Firstly, I think everyone wants to be, but when you get there, it's tough.
And in today's time, more
It's
so.
in today's time more so. A lot of pressure around from everywhere. I think we can support each other, and we obviously can get a lot more support as well. I feel like if we talk about just from a people's perspective, I think it's very important for leaders to think diversity, right? I think leaders today don't want 21 years. They've always experienced, like, why can't I have the same 35-year-old, someone with experience and have done it before. We need to question the norm. HR needs to question the norm. Why? We need, if you want to be disruptive, you need to build people who are going to help you be disruptive. And I think, as leaders, it is our role to leave the organization better than what we inherited.
Absolutely.
And I think and the way you will do that is, if you're going to keep having people who are the same as you, or the same experiences as before, they will never have that challenge mindset, and they will always, as a leader, expect you to have the answer. So if you're sitting in a meeting, they'll look at you. Okay, tell me now what? Versus you want people to give you the answers and you make the choices. Okay, I have these 10 views. Which is the choice I want to make, which is like going to get me there? So I think the diversity of opinions, the ability to listen more, the ability to not be insecure about your job as a leader, because you will be replaced, and that's fine. Either you go on an upper job or there's someone better who will come and do a much better job than you, but have the impact and have the purpose to leave the organization better than what you inherited.
Where have you seen leaders really being disruptive in today's times?
There is the startup founder community that have been really disruptive. Look at the lens cards of the world, or look at Boat, or look at Noise, and there are so many other startups that have look at Ind Money or Paytm. They've revolutionized the way we were used to doing things. And I think there's been a lot of and a lot of founders have been that disruptive mindset. In big organizations also, disruption doesn't mean that you have to sometimes just invent something. Disruption can be in many forms, and disruption can be when you are looking at productivity and looking at measures in terms of, okay, how can I challenge the status quo of my cost base or of my revenue base? So disruption doesn't always mean that you start a new business, you start a new technology vertical, you start something different. In your own mindset, in your own vertical, just challenging the norms,
The status quo.
Status quo is disruption, because we've done this. I mean, when I'm there, and I always challenge this. We've always done this like this. So I think disruption doesn't mean always a big thing. It means in your avenues, in your lane, what you can challenge.
And I think that is what I also believe in. I believe that gone are the days when you had leadership which was hierarchical. And today I'm seeing leadership becoming more as a group of people. And it could be shared leadership as well. It doesn't have to be that I'm the boss all the time.
I think shared leadership, as you described, is critical. You cannot have one individual take the shots every time. There is a capacity of every individual to get it wrong more than once, more than twice. But when you have a shared leadership concept, you're always trusting. I think a lot of people don't want to trust their immediate team members or people down below or people up, right? But if you don't have that trust, then you will never be able to disrupt or create something new. You need to trust, because if I have to spend some time in evaluating another problem, then someone on the leadership team is still wants to make sure that the ship keeps going and is sailing, and that is your bread and butter. You cannot mess around with your bread and butter, but you need to also. So I always believe in this concept of you need to always work for today, but disrupt for tomorrow.
Interesting. Absolutely. We generally think of comp and ben as HR's domain. But you've been very provocative in the way that you've said that it's truly a strategic lever that you can use to help align with the organization's strategic outcomes. You've also said that comp and ben leaders need to be at the table when the strategy of the organization is being put in place and not after it's been put in place. Can you give me some insights into why and how do you believe compensation actually drives business strategy?
Yeah. No, it's a good question, and absolutely, I think I'm definitely in a more progressive way thinking that comp and ben leaders needs to be more involved in strategy making, and I, truly believe that comp teams hold a lot of data, and with AI, data sciences is going to play a very, very important role. So in the past, what used to happen is comp used to be like, okay, fine, give me all the data, get me the market data, say, okay, how much the ranges are, how should we be paying the people? And when we talk about affordability versus impact now, business leaders know, okay, this is the area that I want to go in, okay? And do we have the talent? The question is, do we have the talent or not? Comp and Ben people have that answer. Okay, if we don't have the talent, where should we get it from? Comp teams have that answer. How much should we pay them? How much should we keep them aside at the budget? Comp teams have that answer. So if you are involving the comp team early on in terms of, okay, this is the business strategy I'm taking, they can help you preserve that budget. They can help you get your best ROI dollars of that budget. They can also tell you that where their competitors are hiring from, or we are losing talent to the competitors. If you involve them early enough, they have this wealth of data that you can use it for the strategy because they control the whole people. They can also tell you how you are structured versus another organization is structured, how your business division is structured versus another business division. How can you become more efficient because you have so many people at this layer versus they have so many people at that layer. So there is a lot of knowledge and mathematics and science behind the comp teams. That is what they're going to turn into data science. And with data science, their job is going to get a lot more easier. With AI, I mean. And they could focus a lot more on strategy. Earlier, their job was a lot more assembling of data. Look at it in this spreadsheet, then copy paste in that, then put it in our systems, then put it in that system. They didn't have the time. And these are small teams, these are very small teams. But now, if you're going to involve them early, and this job can be automated through AI, they will have the time to do more strategic visioning and strategic thinking to be able to get some of the answers for you as a business of where you are taking the business.
And if you get them involved earlier on and they're aligned to business vision and not necessarily market trends, what really changes in the mix?
Well, what changes is that you can adopt that strategy faster in the market. If you are sitting and people are discussing about the strategy, then someone will go to HR, someone will find that out. The process just takes longer. And today we all know that every business is running on a fast pace, right? And if we can shorten that pace and make it a smaller time, because you are asking a question in that meeting, and can you tell me, okay, how many people does ABC hire in data sciences, and you're able to get that answer for me within minutes, and say, okay, how much budget do we need to keep aside? The decision making is so much faster that the strategy can really boil to life. And then they can also connect the dots, right? How they can connect the dots is because you said in that meeting, I need to keep a budget of $100,000 to hire X person. And when you did the review, you said, no, but I don't have that 100,000. They can remind you, where is that 100,000 now going to come from? You don't have any extra dollars, right? So it's optimizing your each dollar spend, and they can help you optimize that each dollar spend and keep you, because you are facing with multiple decisions on a regular basis, and they are able to connect those dots.
And also, I think comp being disruptive itself, to say, can we look at new talent pools? Can we get people who we may not even have looked at earlier? Can we try and bring them in? How do we get high value resources or high value talent, but at mid-level, mid-value costs?
100%. A lot of times they say, these are my key talent, but I cannot afford them because my ranges don't allow. The ranges can then become more creative. Sometimes they say, okay, I cannot hire talent from outside because the model that I have on base and bonus and LTI doesn't work up. We don't give sign-on bonuses, and hence someone will not come. These people can then take those strategic inputs and be innovative and creative to get the right people.
Maybe internally,
externally, wherever. But I think the importance is that the business strategy, if it's thriving on your people strategy, the people strategy, of course, is an HR agenda. And of course, CNB is part of HR. But the faster you involve them, the better outcome you can get for your business strategy.
And one really doesn't look at it like that always.
They don't. I don't think right now they do. But I think people have since the time you've been doing a lot more scenario modeling as a business leader.
Okay.
And you've been saying, I think COVID changed this quite a lot for every person to say, okay, now what is the scenario I have today and tomorrow and day after? And now businesses do a lot more scenario modeling. And who better than doing these scenario modeling on talent with you than the CNB people?
And this again links back to what we started off with, where you said that people are now being assessed on their impact and not just on their skill. So you might be a skilled CNB team, but if you're not helping impact the strategic outcomes of your business, then what are you there for?
I think you said it beautifully. That is what it means, is how I can push my limit to, again, use the skill set of these people who have always been into the people data business and use them for a much greater impact, which deals with my business strategy, business talent, the talent strategy I have, the ROI of compensation spend that I will be doing. Can I afford it?
In this world today, completely disrupted world, as we call it, what do you think future comp leaders will need to develop starting now?
I think we talked about business strategy. So I think it's not like inherent, like you will earn that seat. You have to also be a visionary, understanding the business, context of the business, where are they coming from, what are the ideas, where is this industry moving. So I would say business acumen, strategic thinking, AI driven people analytics will be quite important as skill sets that future CNB leaders might need.
Do you see any human skills becoming a part of it?
I mean, they are part of HR. So human is inherently part of their skill set. You have to have the human empathy. You can't be making decisions on a spreadsheet. You can't say, okay, fine, we can't afford, let's fire 50 people. That is not the way you can ever run any business. There has to be a human element to looking at businesses. And that's, to me, is a given. That hopefully everyone should have in their organization. But I know it's easier said than done. But I mean, that is the core skill everyone will need.
And that's reassuring to hear that, Sam, because, in a world that's turning so AI, one always wonders whether we're going to stop feeling the impact of humans at the workplace. And, what you've said is really reassuring that we need it and it'll continue to be needed.
Yeah. I feel any technology, I mean, we've gone through a few technology changes. So this is not the first one. We went through internet. We went through the whole IT, the whole tech boom. We went through the financial crisis. We went through COVID, and we've always emerged stronger. So I don't think AI as something will really disrupt, and we will not have jobs in the future. I think, again, if you are into the adaptability, you are an everyday learner, you are agile, you will be okay. I think panic is never going to help. It's more around that, you just need to move on with times.
Yeah.
And I think that's what history has always taught us, and we've always become better. So I am not fearful AI will take jobs away. It will just help us realize a full potential in a different way.
Very interesting. And I cannot thank you enough for the time that you've shared with us.
No, thank you. I mean, it has been an absolute pleasure. I truly enjoyed it. I spoke from my heart.
Our pleasure entirely. Today's conversation with Sambhav Rakyan reminds us that the future of work will not be shaped by technology alone, nor by talent, and not even by leadership. It will be shaped by the choices we make about value, about fairness, about who we reward and why. Compensation, as Sambhav shows us, is not just about pay. It is about priorities, strategies, and what organizations truly stand for. To our listeners, if this episode made you question your assumptions about talent, growth, fairness, please share it with a colleague who's shaping people's strategy from the inside. Follow the People Blueprint on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube. And until next time, stay curious and get future ready.